middle, and because there are still a few people that I need to inform. But those of you who are watching online, so we are starting the webinar with Forcier Consulting now. Forcier Consulting is a very special company. It's a company that has participated before last year, and this is the second round. And the reason they're very special is this. First and foremost, Forcier, or the challenge that they presented, is the challenge or the format that we would like to convert all our future challenges to. Those who have participated in X-Culture for a while probably know that our traditional challenge, traditional task is market expansion as far as marketing strategy, and the questions tend to be somewhat general. So usually the question is, well, here is a company, it does well in the domestic market, it wants to expand internationally, how can you help? Or what would be the best market and how the company can succeed there? It's an interesting challenge, it's definitely international business, we get lots of good suggestions from the students, but the questions are relatively general, and that makes it a little kind of more difficult on the part of the students, because they just don't know how to go about it. With Forcier, we have a slightly different situation. So the company gave us a set of very, very specific questions. Like, for example, they want to know the list or have the list of potential projects for Forcier to work on, all the way to the names and contacts of the responsible people. For example, the list of competition, again, very specific list of other companies that do this kind of research. Or when it comes to, for example, hiring people, again, they have a very specific question. How can we hire people in this area? What would it take? How do we find people with research degrees who are willing to work in that particular area? Or, for example, operating cost. Again, rather than just a general, give us an estimated budget for marketing, Forcier Challenge asks you for very specific estimates for very specific operations. Like, for example, how much would it cost to rent a one-room condo in that country for one of our researchers? Or how much would it cost to hire a car, perhaps even with bodyguards, that kind of stuff. And so by being much more specific, we kind of achieve several goals. One, the information, the research that the students do and the information that those research efforts return is something that is more usable, more specific for the company. At the same time, that also guides students' efforts. So rather than just working on something, they have a very specific task or a very specific list of questions that they need to answer. And so in the end, that seems to satisfy both students more, but also the client more. And so for this time, Forcier's challenge is the only one that is this specific. We are trying to move in that direction, and so far have been changing some of the questions in our other general challenges. Another very specific thing about, or very special thing about Forcier is that the company is extremely supportive of the students who are working on the challenges. Ian here, our guest today that I will introduce in a minute, has been extremely helpful as far as answering student questions, providing information, participating in these webinars. Forcier even have had experience with hiring some of our students who apparently did a good job and then eventually were interested in the company and the company was interested in them, so that's a huge deal as well. But anyway, without any further ado, I would like to introduce today's guest. It's Ian Sandler. Ian is, as I understand, responsible for all kinds of things at Forcier, including research. He is, every time we have a webinar with him, he's in a different geographic location. He travels a lot. I just checked with him, and now he's actually in the United States in Washington, D.C. And I guess I'm going to turn to Ian now, and please go ahead.
Great. Well, it's a pleasure to meet all of you. And I hope today I can answer some of your questions, introduce the company a little more, go into a little more depth in the proposal itself, and really just shed as much light on Forcier as I can. So to start, my name's Ian Sandler. I'm the business development manager for North America for Forcier Consulting. Primarily what I'm responsible for is handling all opportunities that are coming out at the headquarters level in Washington, D.C. in particular, as well as kind of broader U.S.-based partnerships. So what that means is working a lot with USAID, the single largest donor for development funding in the world, about $16 billion a year. So a very important partner for us, as well as those kind of international NGOs that are based here. So all of the big ones like Save the Children and Plan International, those kind of big organizations based here in DC. So my job is to represent us here in DC, take a lot of those meetings, look for opportunities and ways that we can collaborate in our countries in Africa. So to begin on Forcier Consulting, which I'm sure you guys already have a good knowledge of, Forcier is a monitoring and evaluation and research firm. So we are conducting all types of program evaluations for development programs and organizations in Africa, as well as different kind of social research, opinion polling, market research, anything that involves data collection in logistically challenging environments is Forcier's kind of game. That means that.
Again, can you clarify what is logistically challenging areas?
Good question. Logistically challenging can mean something different to a lot of people. For us, that means some of the hardest places on earth. And what I mean is, for example, in Somalia, that's working with areas that are held by Al-Shabaab, the terrorist organization. It can be rebel-controlled areas in South Sudan. It can also just mean intense flooded areas in South Sudan where we are taking river boats because we cannot access it by any other traditional means. So logistically challenging, I'm comparing it more to conducting research in New York City. While it may be difficult to interview the people, getting around is a little easier than in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So places where we're running into so many different problems, and what I always say is Forcier's specialty is mitigating problems. We know that they will happen in these places, so how are we going to think on our feet using our past experience and work through some of these challenges that will inevitably arise? So on that note, Forcier works exclusively in Africa, and that is kind of our home. We started in South Sudan with one research consultant, Natalie Forcier, in 2011. Natalie started just doing that one-off kind of program evaluation. And what I mean by that is, let's say you have an organization like UNICEF. Mm-hmm. And UNICEF is doing a program on water and sanitation in a rural community in South Sudan. When they're done with the entire program, we will come in and we will evaluate the program. So we will interview a number of people, either quantitatively with smartphones and tablets, talking to people face-to-face, asking them questions, yes or no questions, or simple one-word questions, and getting all of their data. Or we will do qualitative interviewing, which means we will interview people with more open-ended questions, kind of getting really their open-ended responses, or holding big focus groups with a bunch of people. So we want to establish, did this program actually work? And that can be at the end of a program, at the beginning of a program called a baseline, or at the middle. So traditionally that's a lot of our work. But it started with Natalie just doing this one thing. Now we have about 200 staff across offices.
200? I didn't realize you were so big.
Oh, since the last webinar that we've done, we're now in 12 countries.
Wow, so I didn't know that. Okay.
Rapidly expanding. So now we have offices in the Democratic Republic of Congo, Egypt, Nairobi, South Sudan, Sudan, Somalia, Mozambique, and we are opening our newest one in Sierra Leone, which I just got back from last week, so to cover West Africa. Wow. So really, these areas are, to be frank, a lot of the places that a lot of people do not want to work or work in for all of these various challenges that we encounter, which is why X-Culture is so important, because we need to be prepared, have as much information as we can when going into new places. It takes a lot of time and a lot of money to work in these places to get set up, because our model is very different. Traditionally, research firms send one consultant from London or Paris or DC. They design all of these research tools. They fly into a country that they probably do not know that much about. They collect all this data. They come back and write a report. We don't believe in that. We want to develop the capacity of national researchers in the country. So when we set up shop in a country, it becomes a permanent base for us. And what that means is that we have 65 staff in Somalia, and 45 of them are Somalian researchers, about the same in South Sudan. So,
who are the other ones?
The other ones are international expatriates that include project managers and analysts, different logistics people. Primarily, though, those are what we call our research officers that are really managing the logistics of the program and writing those reports. It also includes our methodologists that are kind of finding the sampling frames and designing all of the tools. So that's kind of the main makeup, which I can go into more as well. But basically, we have these places in all these offices, and when we set up, we want to be there. That does mean that we will treat these as regional hubs, if you will, in which that we will conduct research in surrounding countries from these bases, and that's more on a one-off basis, which we do plenty. So I say we've worked in 12 countries, but we don't have offices in all 12 of those countries, which again is why X-Culture is so important, because while we know about the places that we work very well because we are there and on the ground, it's almost a different sell for us. So we kind of have, from my side, two different sells in terms of we're either your locally grounded kind of truth in that we know the location better than anyone else because we're there, or because of our close proximity and our experience working in similar challenging environments, it enables us to work in a neighboring country better than someone from London. So if we're going into these new environments, we really need to be prepared from our proposal writing team's perspective as well. So Vas, maybe I can go into a little bit more in depth why X-Culture is that important.
Sure. Yep.
So in terms of procurement and how we actually get a lot of the work that we do, what's really important for us is the internet. To be completely honest, an organization like UNICEF or Save the Children or World Vision, they will put out a term of reference, is what it's called. And what that means is they will post online and say, we're looking for either a consultant or a firm to do this type of research. Here are all of the specifications that you will need and all of the things you will have to design. Write a proposal, send it out. We have a proposal writing team that's currently based in Cairo. That's what I did for a year and a half before moving to DC only about 6 months ago. So we are sending out as many of these proposals as well to get this work. The other way that we get work is from now myself and Natalie when we're kind of traveling in these places, taking meetings, or at the kind of HQ levels in London or DC or Brussels, the big development centers. That's another way that we get work through our kind of broader partnerships. So regardless, when we're writing these proposals on places that we don't know, we need as much information as we can up front. What's the situation like in this country? How much should we be paying people? What does it cost for all of these different logistical information? Becomes incredibly important when we have a week to do it, if that. We need to design a complex methodology around a very difficult sampling frame. Having all this information on hand beforehand is incredibly useful for us. So, yeah.
Can I ask a few questions? So we have literally dozens of questions coming by now. But before we get to those more specific questions, one general post. Your, I don't want to use the word operatives, I guess researchers, staff on the ground. How dangerous is that? Are they just like, the CIA, or is more just regular research?
Oh, I would love to glorify everything we do that much to say we're CIA operatives, but no, we're all data nerds, to be honest. We're definitely research nerds. We love data, we love research. Well, I think that's cool. Maybe someone else might not. So to say that means we have two different kind of spheres of researchers, and they are going into very difficult environments. But first and foremost, safety is always of our utmost concern. And that means that we have full duty of care policies in every country that we work, standardized across, the Forcier group. And that is to make sure that everyone is covered at all times. There's a full security assessment that we do from our security teams in country before every project that we do too.
So you would actually do need to have some sort of security, like armed guards?
Yeah, we do in our offices. So those are, but they're it's extremely safe in the capitals that we work. Extremely safe. They're really nice places. They are in compounds, and they are walled, guarded compounds. But that's a security measure, just because something could inevitably go wrong. But the places that we work, if it's a difficult, very difficult environment. Let's say we're going into a rebel-controlled area in South Sudan. I'm not going to do that research because I will not get the best data. First and foremost, no one's going to talk to me because I'm not going to elicit the same results because I'm not South Sudanese. And the benefit of our company and the strong advantage is that we are able to speak with people and ask these questions that no one else can because it's coming from someone from that community. So in South Sudan, for instance, if we are sending one of our Nuer speakers, so a Nuer is an ethnic group in South Sudan and a language, and let's say it is a female Nuer speaker, and she's going to conduct research on female genital mutilation / cutting in South Sudan, she's going to be able to talk to South Sudanese women from that community way more easier than I am, which just would not work. So while, yes, it may be a dangerous place, it's not as dangerous for that researcher because they're part of that community, and she's able to access the respondents and ask those questions that no one else will. So there's that side, our national researchers. There's also our international researchers, which we have a few of in each country office, which will go into other places where it actually is more of a benefit to be an international person than it is from that place. So we kind of have both sides. But first and foremost, again, safety is key, and we are constantly assessing what part of the country we can go to and what part we can't.
That makes perfect sense. A number of questions, and probably we'll just go in order in which they appear in the X-Culture Challenge. Many students, literally about a dozen emails, are asking, what are your current assessment of what we call the success factors in the new market? In other words, what kind of countries are you looking for, without naming the countries, but what would be the characteristics of the countries where you would consider expanding into?
Sure. So Africa is a very diverse continent, and that is one of our big goals as a company, is to actually get that information out there. Africa is not a country. Africa is a continent. And there are 54 different countries, depending on who you ask.
Right, and it's a huge continent too, both by population and by size.
Absolutely. So some people will say, okay, you work in Ethiopia, you can work in Senegal then too. They're like next door, right? People don't realize that it's, the geographic area of 3 different Americas. So, one, we're trying to teach that. But realizing this is that every country in Africa is very different, which again is why we need this information. But some are more similar than others in terms of the working conditions and the research conditions. So, for example, one country I will say, South Africa. South Africa is a very developed country. And in terms of logistically challenging, yeah, there are some difficult places, but it's not as hard to collect data as it is in somewhere like Somalia, where there are no research firms. So in terms of competition, one thing we look at is, are there other firms like us in this place? A lot of the times we are competing with other local firms from that place. Are there qualified local firms? Do they have a great history with clients that we would potentially work with? So also, what we like to say is we work in post-conflict and fragile states. Somewhere like South Africa, very stable. And we don't want to go into an active war zone. We're not working in Syria. But some of the places, like South Sudan, are in, active conflict. But we like to try for post-conflict areas. So what that means is a country that maybe is still experiencing some inner turmoil, is still receiving humanitarian assistance in some way, but is making it very difficult for anyone to operate in, which is why data is that much more crucial. So if there is a very active humanitarian assistance and development sector in that country, that's somewhere we want to be, because we need to impact that policy. What we say is we believe in evidence-responsive programming. So if you're going to go into that country and give billions of dollars, do it knowing what that country needs, what the people need. How can we affect it?
Yeah. And about that. So why only Africa? And would you consider going to other regions that are equally perhaps dangerous or unstable, but are on different continents? And so we have questions about Asia, we have questions about Latin America, Eastern Europe. Would you consider expanding into those regions at all?
Sure. So the question first, why Africa? Great question. It's more so because that is where we started and that's where our passions lie. In terms of all of the different cultures and the different geographical areas, it's more of our interest, and it's more so that we don't become opportunists. We don't want, there are so many different monitoring and evaluation research firms that operate all over the world, and they're more what we call body shops, in terms of they have a 30-person team in DC that does finance and logistics, and every project that they do is contract based, and their staff is temporarily hired at that point. So what we want to do is really set up and build up the capacity of these local researchers, and we can't do that all over the world. So starting small, in 100 years, if we're still there, who knows, maybe we would be. But on that note as well, we have a partnership with a South Asian research firm, and it is a new company called Ciergo, and that company actually does service some of these logistically difficult environments in other places. So looking at Pakistan and Syria, things like that, Bangladesh, those would come from some of our other kind of sister companies. So to keep in mind, Forcier, it's a group of companies. So Forcier Africa is actually incorporated in Hong Kong and owns Forcier South Sudan, Forcier Somalia, Forcier Egypt, Forcier DRC, all of these different ones. There's
so in different locations you actually have different legal entities, right, or legal persons.
So they're completely different legal entities, which helps with contracting and all of those things. It also means that in reality, we're not a branch office. We are a company that is set up there to do business in that country. So we have different entities for different purposes. We also have Forcier US, which is the company I'm technically employed by, which is in working with the US government. Forcier UK, that is working with DFID, the British government, things like that.
Very interesting. Now, we have a number of people here in the live room: Tani, Natalia, Matthias, Mariana, and so on and so on. I'm going to ask them to ask questions in a minute. They probably joined because they had some questions. One more question, if I may, came from a student via email. How does the process work when all those funding agencies or government agencies look for a company like yours? Or in other words, how do you find them? Is that always an open competition? They just post an ad and say who can do research, and you apply and explain why you're better than others? Or is it more about whom you know, and then one student asks, is this industry corrupt in any way, especially given that some of the countries where you work may have some corruption going on? So how those connections between companies like yours and the clients who actually give the funds and want to know how they've been spent, how those connections are made? Is it always transparent, or sometimes it involves some sort of, I don't know, lobbying or some sort of, connections behind the closed doors?
Sure. First off, our goal at Forcier is to prevent some of this corruption by evaluating these programs.
Right.
So all of this money is being put in. If you look at Afghanistan as an example, Afghanistan, especially by the U.S. government, there was billions and billions of dollars that no one has any idea what happened with it. It was not evaluated properly. And a big focus now in the development world and donors is on monitoring and evaluation, which is great for our company, great for taxpayer dollars, great for the people that it's benefiting to actually know where this is going. So that's a real goal of ours.
And I assume by knowing how it worked last time, you know better how to invest the next time, right? Without the proper evaluation, how can you go into the future?
And to expose organizations, their positives and their negatives. So we are not primarily working with donor governments directly. We're too small at this point in time. We've only been around 5 years. The companies that are, it's called priming and subcontracting, priming and subbing. When you prime for the U.S. government, you're handling contracts of 25 to 75 million. Sometimes the largest U.S. aid contract was just awarded to World Vision last year. It was for $1 billion. We're not quite there as a company. One day, hopefully. But what that means is that we are
priming. But those big contracts, like $1 billion, they will actually hire someone like your company to do the evaluation?
Exactly. So these companies, these implementers, the prime implementers, will then hire us to do the work on the ground. So what that means is, let's say U.S. aid, so the U.S. is, donor arm for humanitarian development, they will give a contract on girls' education in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Let's say that's won by someone like Save the Children. Save the Children will then subcontract us to do various degrees of the research process. Our ideal goal is to be a partner throughout the entire consortium to cover all of the monitoring and evaluation throughout the project. That's harder to get. A lot of the times we are subcontracted for individual assessments at different parts of the life cycle of the process. So we're working towards that point, to answer your question, of working primarily with these donor governments, but we're not there yet. So we're now looking for partnerships for the larger organizations that are working with them. Is there another part of the question that I missed?
No, that's exactly what I wanted to know. Yeah. So now you guys, although Benjamin, Tony, Natalia, whoever else is in the room, would you like to ask any questions? If you so, please go ahead. Just unmute yourself and go ahead with your questions. It looks like Tony is going to ask, right?
Hello, I'm Tony Goulart. My question is, what is the Forcier's biggest competitor?
Sure. I mean, our competitors depend really on our markets. So they also are very different from our model. So to be honest, we don't have the competitor in the traditional sense of people that are setting up offices like we are with staff in the countries. So our primary competitors are in London, are in Paris. And I will always say, first and foremost, we have great partnerships with our competitors. So I would never speak ill of them. And I do truly believe that they are doing great work. We're just doing a little bit of a different work. So some of the companies that we are competing against but also working with are Integrity Research. And they're a great company, and we work with them frequently. So Integrity Research, that's one example. They're out of London, but they are based in London, working in when they get a contract in one of these places. So they're what we call more contract-based work, whereas we're more permanently settled. So again, different, and depending on the partner or client that's hiring us, would look for different things. So that's one example. But I will also say we are competing a lot with more regionally based African groups. So there are a lot of really great organizations that are working in Ethiopia and Kenya, and that's something really important to consider when we think of a market that we're going into. Just to give you an idea, we have tried to open an office in Kenya 3 or 4 different times in the last 5 years, and it's really difficult because it's a very saturated market, and that means that there are a lot of very qualified Kenyan firms that are doing the same type of work that we are. So does it make sense for us to go there and try and develop national capacity when there already is a really qualified research base? Probably not, which is why somewhere like South Sudan, where there were no research firms, made more sense for us. So that's an example of a potential competitor.
Any more questions from people here in the room? All right, let me then move on to the next question that we received via email. There is a very interesting one. How do you currently select your staff? So what recruitment mechanisms do you use, and then what do you select them for?
Sure. So for
Giovanni Salgado, by the way, just so people know that I'm reading the emails. Yes, please go ahead.
So for some of our national staff in countries, we're working with a lot of universities. So we work with the University of Hargeisa in Somaliland, the University of Freetown in Sierra Leone. We're looking for some kind of university degree, if possible, or experience with data collection. So a lot of researchers start as enumerators. Enumerators or interviewers are the actual people that are going around with the smartphones and conducting the research, whereas our permanent staff are the ones who are managing those quantitative enumerators in the field. So oftentimes they start as those data collectors, where they're trained on the survey, they're trained on how to use the smartphone, they collect the data. So we look for some experience with that, or experience with data collection in the past. But really, we're looking for malleability and a desire to learn. So much of Forcier is being adaptable, having previous experience doing very different things, and that kind of hunger to learn more. So that's very important, and I can't understate in our interview process. The same goes for our international hires. Really, we would love to see research experience. If you're coming into a research officer role, you have to handle a lot of different things. You are writing reports, you're doing some kind of methodological design, you have to deal with the logistics of working in these countries. So we want to see that you've done some kind of program management. If you have research skills in the past, that's fantastic. If you have experience with some of the research programs that we use, such as Stata or R for different data analysis, SPSS, these are really important.
Right.
So these kind of things we're looking for. Usually it's a master's degree in some kind of development-related field. But really, I would say what we always say is 2 out of 3 of our hires are personality hires. So to put it simply, when you're in a small compound in Hargeisa, Somalia, with 15 other people for the next 6 months, are you going to all kill each other, or are you going to work?
Good point. Yeah. All right. Another question. This one comes from Eloidy. Are there any particular markets that you're especially interested in?
Absolutely. In
terms of the new markets, obviously.
Yeah. First, let me start with what we're not interested in as much. We're not as interested right now in North Africa because North Africa is so much different from sub-Saharan Africa. It's just completely out of our wheelhouse, really, and is going to take a whole lot of time and resources to develop. So I'd be curious to hear if there was a more easy or feasible option, but somewhere we're not as interested in. What we're very interested in is West Africa in particular. So I just got back from Liberia and Sierra Leone, both countries that we're very interested in and are high priorities. Something we know about, we've conducted work in Sierra Leone, but we don't know as much about the entire climate. So some of those other countries in the surrounding area, particularly the French ones, are of a lot of interest to us. Forcier is really starting to grow our linguistic capabilities as a firm. I counted the other day, and we speak about 25 languages across the firm. So we're really trying to grow French in particular and Portuguese. So that means that 17 countries in West Africa, as well as Mozambique and Angola, these are very high priority because they're very similar in stability but still developing, very impoverished and in need of good research and good data. So something we'd like to look in further.
Here's another question from Elodie. I hope I pronounced it correctly. She's actually right here in the room. I'm not sure why she's not volunteering to ask it live. But anyway, she sent that email, that question via email and asking here. So in the current challenge, you're first asking the students to look for specific projects that are going on, so projects that you potentially can work on, and only then you ask them to select a market. Was there any logic to that sequence, or it just happened to be so because that just fits with the general challenge that the culture normally has, in our template? So
little bit of both. It's going to be difficult to pick a market without knowing a lot of things. You're going to probably have to look at a few different markets. What I would generally recommend is look at funding first. So what I always do is follow the U.S. government. It's really the best way because where U.S. government money goes, everyone follows. If the U.S. government is putting $850 million into Ethiopia, I will guarantee that there will be 100 development organizations that will then go use that money and work in that country, which then means work for us. So work for those programs. So first, determine from the large donors which countries are getting the most money, but don't everyone focus on Ethiopia, Tanzania, and Kenya, because I'll tell you those are the top 3 in Africa.
So you mean when the U.S. government commits some funds to, let's say, Ethiopia, right? So
Yes.
It's not the U.S. government that actually hires you later on. It's the companies or subcontractors that use that money to develop certain programs or do something on the ground who will then hire you as a client. Is that how it works?
Absolutely. They will then hire us as a client. So we're the subcontractor and they're the prime contractor. So that's a good start. And there are actual websites that you can use to see exactly where U.S. money is going. So the U.S. government and all donor governments are incredibly transparent in terms of the money that they are obligating and distributing. So they actually let you know exactly how much money is going to each country, exactly how much money each company is receiving, exactly how much money is going for each sector and each project. Everything is listed transparently. So there's something called the Foreign Aid Dashboard. It's explorer.usaid.gov/aid dashboard. A good place to look, which I can also send you later, Voss, and you can distribute, but it's a good place to look for U.S. money. So anyways, that would be a good way to find out first what is good market-wise. But then what we need to know is, are there a lot of projects going on there? So let's say, for example, Mauritania. Personally, I don't know much about Mauritania, but I can guarantee you that there are not as many projects in Mauritania as there is in South Sudan. And what that means is if those projects are not going on, we're not going to have very much work. If we can't evaluate the projects, if there are not a lot of organizations working there, we can't do it. So first and foremost, besides the U.S. money, is are there organizations in that country? Are there a lot of implementing agencies? So Mercy Corps, Plan, and PACT, and World Vision, and Save the Children, and Oxfam, and all of those, are they in that country? Do they have a base? Because if they have a base, they're doing programs, they need research. So these are the things that we have to know before we can really pick a market. So you're going to have to kind of look at a few different markets based on these different trends. And I hope to see some kind of wild cards as well, things that I wouldn't guess. Again, like those big top 3 in East Africa, we know that. I want to know about the other ones. And then what's actually happening in that place. So that's why I say project and organization first, and then you can really pick a market.
Now, a number of questions that ask this in different versions. So you participated in X-Culture last semester, and you saw the reports. This semester, as you know, in the early track already, and in the late track in the coming weeks, you receive a weekly analytical summary, in a sense, of the things that students put together. So you kind of know what normally X-Culture students can provide to you. So question 1, of the things that you've already seen, which ones do you find useful and would like to see more of? And which ones perhaps are not very useful, and maybe students shouldn't even waste their time on preparing that stuff? And then a related question, anything that you haven't seen at all but you would like to see in those reports that students are preparing. So basically, what should they focus on to please you, to deliver the most value to you as a company?
Absolutely. First, there was a little pop-up question that asked about Senegal. Great choice. I would love to hear about Senegal. Again, Dakar is a big center for development in West Africa. A lot of the regional francophone country bases are out of Dakar, and not something we know a lot about. So would definitely be interested. Second, what we can use. What we don't use. So one thing that we changed this time in this semester was the order of the report, which is actually a little different from the order of the project that they're doing for X-Culture. Right. So that structure is actually really important. It's not telling us how you came about it, but starting with your market and then going by and explaining why you chose that market, and that logical flow is really important in the report that we can see. So you start and you say, Algeria is this, and then you go down in your report structure that we tried to lay out, and we're still working on perfecting, but and saying, these are all the organizations that are here. This is all the money that is there. These are the programs that are going on. This is why the benefits of I think it's there. You have no competition, so that by the end of your report, I go, wow, they just gave me 30 pages logically explained on why I should go into this country that they proposed at the beginning. So that kind of logical flow from a report-wise is really, really important, especially as we read a lot of them. And we do read all of them, and they were fantastic. So I'm really looking forward to this semester. But some of the things that I think we do not have to focus on as much are things like company registration, some of the more legal aspects of it. This is really important, but something that we would probably have to go a lot more in depth when I go to the country and check it out. I don't expect us to get a lot of details on it. I mean, we want to know things about research in the country, so things like, is it possible, is there a census there? Do you have to work through a research bureau from the government? But things like company registration and tax, things like that, maybe not as important right now. It may be difficult to find some of the rates for people. We know that they're similar.
Compensation rates, you mean?
Yeah, rates for enumerators, rates for researchers, rates for translators. It may be difficult, and it may be difficult to find staff, and that's okay. A large part of my job is actually just stalking LinkedIn and finding people for things that I need. I'm an expert at looking online and finding information from people. So yes, you can look at LinkedIn and try and find us consultants. That would be interesting and really great, but maybe an afterthought. So to give you an idea, let's say I'm going to bid on a proposal in Mali, but I don't know anyone in Mali. What I try and do is I try and find a freelance consultant of someone from that country. So an actual Malian with research experience that then I can put on our proposal and say he's going to work on our team. This is just to start, not for before we actually go into the country, just so we can get a contract. That would be useful, finding someone like that. But again, if we find out that that may be a lot of work, and it is, maybe later. But what's really important that I want to know is competitors, organizations in the country. So a list or somewhat of who's actually doing work in that country that we could potentially work for. All of these different nonprofits and NGOs, private businesses, anything like that, that you feel could use research. I'd like to know that list in that country, because that's why I will make a decision. When I went to Sierra Leone and Liberia, I made a list of 90 organizations in each one. So I think that what would be useful is that, and as well as our competitors. Again, when you look at Kenya, you're going to find that there's a lot of money in Kenya, and you're going to find that there are a lot of organizations in Kenya that we could work for. That's only one half of the puzzle. You then have to compare that to the million different research firms that are there that are already doing great work. So does it make sense to go enter this market, as we've tried and not done very successfully, and compete against these pre-existing firms? So that's the kind of really two most important parts.
So is there any sort of an ultimate deliverable for your company? Like, for example, some of our other partners, they would say that we sell products like a product, let's say XYZ. And so we would like you to develop a market entry strategy for that product. But as the ultimate deliverable, why don't you actually try to find, let's say, a chain of stores that would be willing to sell that product and bring us the contract? So for Forcier, is there something that students can bring to you where you would say, like, wow, this is great. I mean, this is like real contract or something. So do we have anything of that kind for Forcier?
For this semester, what I think would be best is if you, going through the process, you did all this research, you found a market. Then once you found the market, you've proven that this is the market. So you may do all this research, find a market, and then go to prove it and change your mind. And that's fine. But let's say you do this research, you find the market, you prove it through our competitor lists and our contacts and all of these things, logistics. You say this is the place you need to go. You're going to the Ivory Coast. Once you do that, the best thing would be to find us a term of reference, to find us a project that needs research. So, we have an entire department that is doing this 24/7. Every single day, we scour the internet on a predetermined set of websites where they come out. And that's a whole job in itself. But what would be the most useful for us is if you said, okay, this is the country you need to go to, this is why you need to go, and here is one opportunity that is coming out in the next 2 weeks, or they're asking for a research firm that you could bid on. So it's something that we would bid on, but if you found us that term of reference, or TOR, that would be very invaluable.
Very interesting.
Because it proves that your hypotheses were right. So you can say you should work here and there's all this work, and that's great. But find us that example of work, and if you could even say this, we have found 7 different TORs, terms of references, in the last month that have come out of Mali. We're going to go, okay, there's probably a lot of interest there. For your information, we actually keep full data on all of the term of reference that we find in all of our countries. So we know how many have come out, how many we've bid on, and what our success rate was. So all of that information is ultimately what we use to decide if this is a useful amount of time that we should put into this country.
I see, again, we have lots of people here in the room. Benjamin, Natalia, Tony. If you guys want to ask questions, unmute yourself at any time and go ahead with your questions. One that I would like to ask, again, several people asked it online. Apparently, many people would be interested in working for Forcier. What would it take to get a job for one of our students to work with you guys?
Absolutely. As Vas said before, last semester we actually did have a student that is now working in Florida in one of our back offices with us as well.
Not in Somalia.
Not in Somalia yet. Not yet. But there's definitely time. So, I mean, you're already a huge leg up by doing this X-Culture program because you know the industry and you know our company. Big part of working at Forcier is actually learning about Forcier and knowing how we do work and the kind of work that we do. You have a huge introduction by doing this. So I would say that to get a job with us, it's write a great report, and then afterwards express your interest. And I'm always happy to see. So at the end or whatnot, my email can totally be distributed and can be given to anybody that's interested. I'm happy to have a conversation and look at your CV and as well as your report. But the best way, to be honest, is I'm looking at the best reports and I'm seeing what you did on that report, and that's a great gauge for me. One of the best parts about these reports is that it actually shows who's doing what. So I can really see the work that you put in and the knowledge that you have. That's a great start.
Yeah. There is a very interesting question from Benjamin, and he's asking about a possibility of seeing the reports from the students participated last semester, or last year. And just a quick background, overview. On the one hand, it would be a wonderful idea, and we believe that the more information is shared among the ex-culture students, the more you can learn from one another, maybe even sometimes steal some of the ideas and then build upon them and then deliver something even better. So that would be definitely a positive development as far as, the quality of the final reports. On the other hand, we have this challenge that, because most of you participate in it because of your coursework, you are graded on this work. So if we show you all the work that students did last semester, potentially it can create an opportunity for you to simply copy the best work, not do much on your own, and while you may still add a little valuable stuff and please the client, your professor may not be necessarily very happy with that. And so, Jan, I have a question for you. What would be your take on that? I mean, obviously, we have copies of all the reports from the last semester. We have the weekly reports this semester. Do you think it would be a good idea to make them available to the other teams that are working on your challenge? How would you, what would be your preference? How should we handle that?
I mean, I would say, for your concerns, yes and no. From an academic perspective, it seems kind of mildly worrying just that it does take out some of that research aspect. A lot of this is really digging, and I'd be a little afraid just that there would be less digging. But from my perspective, I mean, I do want to see collaboration, and I want to see, okay, let's say it may be useful, let's say you pick Chad as a country, and then you read through reports and you read through someone else's report on Chad, and that may dissuade you. But that's worrying because you're basing that off another student's ideas on that country that may or may not have been right. We have no way to check and label. So maybe we can give some of the top reports, the top certain number, just as a quality perspective.
Yeah, one of the options to consider would be, and that will hopefully take care of the kind of academic aspect of it. We thought that perhaps we can give some grades to students on a weekly basis and have some sort of like a little mini competition each week where everybody submits their work. We have 7 people who've been hired to do the intermediate evaluations and compile all that work into one single analytical summary. And then the idea was that perhaps at that point we can give students kind of grades or maybe even rank them in terms of the quality, at which point we can share all that information because now it's been in a sense used up, so people receive their grades, and even if somebody will copy work of somebody else, it's okay because it's been already graded. So, but at the same time, by opening up that information, the hope is again that somebody will see something in somebody else's work that will give him or her an idea that they would have not had otherwise. And so the idea here is that we will have this kind of competitive collaboration, or where people build upon the work of others. The only big concern with that is that we may run into the problem of the groupthink. So what if, as you said, somebody sees somebody's suggestion, let's say, to go in Somalia, and then, copies that idea, and then somebody sees that there are now 2 teams thinking about Somalia and just follows the suit. And so we may, instead of, independent thinking and competition, have basically the herd effect where just people copy each other because, if everybody's choosing Somalia, maybe we should choose too. And so that's a little concern here, that we may kind of undermine some of the creativity and some of the research. If you can just see what others did and copy it, why would you do your own research? So that's the concerns for the ones who are interested, why we are not always sharing all the information as freely. But we'll definitely think about that, the best way to do it. Maybe, as Ian said, share the best reports from the last year, just to give you an example of what it might look like.
Sure. Very, very quick. I just want to answer the pop-up question that came down there. No, totally. You can totally still go for Ethiopia. I do know a lot, but I would still like to know way more. Have a cursory knowledge of a lot of these locations. So I don't want to dissuade you from picking some of these top countries, but just know that they're not as much our market as others. So it's always great to diversify your portfolio in any company to have more stable locations. One of the things that working in our countries is that they can change rapidly at any point in time. So Somalia can be our biggest market as it is right now, but next week the country could be completely unstable and we may be forced to leave. And if that happens and you put all your eggs in that one unstable basket, that's the end of your company. So while we have our best chances of success and we have the most work in these fragile environments, that also comes with being on a very short rope of that could disappear any moment. So being able to diversify that with more stable countries, doing research in those countries, you're just going to have to look at different things. It's less on humanitarian assistance and more in development programs. So you can definitely look at Ethiopia, Kenya, Tanzania. I still want to know about all the competitors and all of the clients that are there. But just keep in mind that it's not an immediate goal for us. It's more of something that we would use to diversify the rest of our portfolio. But I will reiterate one final time, our goal is to work in all 54 countries in Africa. We want to be a Pan-African firm. That is a very long-term goal, but that's our goal. So all information is good information.
Somebody's asked a question? Okay. So one question that I get from your reaction, could you give a specific example of a project which effectiveness you've evaluated? So some people still seem to have a difficult time understanding what kind of research do you do. Would you be trying to calculate the return on investment, or would you be trying to make some projections for the future, or are you just simply showing that there were, let's say, $10 million and this is how they've been spent? So what would be the specific research questions that you're trying to answer, and maybe with a specific project as an example so we can better understand how it works?
Sure. So again, we do a wide variety of projects and clients and a wide variety of services. So definitely go look at our website. If you haven't done that, strongly recommend it. And on our services page, we actually list what our services are and what those mean. So that's very important. For example, on the social research side, we do the Gallup World Poll. So Gallup Incorporated, one of the biggest opinion polling companies in the world. They're from the 1800s. They do what's called the World Poll. That's in 160 or 180 countries in the world. It's the same questionnaire. It's quantitative, so they ask it with smartphones, and they do it face-to-face. With 1,000 people, it's nationally representative, so it means it's actually statistically representative of the country that you're operating in, on a wide variety of topics across the country. We do this in 7 countries. So we do this in Zambia. We'll go around in Zambia and ask these questions. That's an example of social research that we do. In terms of the program evaluation side, let's take, for example, there's an organization called Internews. Okay, Internews is a media development organization. So they use radio and different media efforts to work in the peace building realm and propagate peace through media. They have a project that's funded by the U.S. government, USAID, called iStream, which is strengthening free and independent media in South Sudan. So what they do is they have radio stations all over the country that are using these radio programs to talk about things like disease outbreak, different security situations, and hopefully the people that are listening to this are gaining valuable information. So what we do is evaluate the efficacy of this program. We do this in a lot of different ways. One way we do it is through a national audience listenership survey. So we go around the country and we interview 2,000 people, 2,500 I think, and we actually assess, has your perceptions, attitudes, behavior, has your knowledge changed after listening to this program? So we're actually evaluating from the baseline before and after. Did listening to this program change your life in a meaningful way? And that's how you can assess if this was a good project or a bad project. For example, with Ebola in West Africa, one of the best ways that Ebola was combated was through radio and information. So when people knew that you were not supposed to wash dead bodies that were infected with Ebola and they stopped doing this, that's one of the biggest ways that Ebola was actually transmitted. So learning about it through the radio actually stopped so many cases. So how do you actually assess this? You have to talk to people. You have to ask them about the program, and you have to ask what you learned. And the only way to also do that is to establish a baseline. So actually, what were you like before you listened to the program, and then after? So, for example, in South Sudan for this program, we are interviewing people all over the country and kind of seeing how their perceptions changed.
I'm amazed how what you do similar to what the academic work. You just do it on a practical level, I guess. You probably matters much more if you just publish a paper that only people in the world read, whereas you actually save lives.
Well, but that's actually
similar.
But that's actually one of the problems too. Is we collect all of this great data. How do we get it out there? One of the worst problems with our company and development in general is that a lot of these reports are proprietary information of the company that we produce them for. So what that means is that 8 different companies will contract us to do the same exact research project, but we cannot legally share any of the information that we've done on other projects because it's owned by that company. So it's similar to, you know, your kind of struggle in that we wish that people were sharing this data more and used it, and it does happen, but that's our goal. How do we get this data and put it in front of the right people and share it amongst the world?
So if I told you, let's write a paper together, submit it to the Academy of Management Journal, you wouldn't be allowed to do that in most cases.
Oh, no, we could definitely do that, but that would be out of our... So we actually have our technical staff is doing that kind of things all the time, producing white papers and writing, producing it, presenting it, things. So we would definitely do that with our technical team.
All right, so we are almost out of time. We have about a dozen people here in the virtual room. Guys, your last chance to ask your questions. If you have any questions, unmute yourself and go ahead and ask them now. So it seems like Benjamin is trying to ask a question. Go ahead. There is no sound for some reason. There is no sound, unfortunately. Anyone else while Benjamin is trying to adjust the sound?
Is he muted, perhaps? I don't think so.
No, he's not muted, but it may be in settings where you select the microphone. By default, sometimes it goes to, you know, like your, apparently the computer has a number of options, and sometimes it may not activate the right microphone that is currently connected. Anyone else while Benjamin is trying to connect his microphone? So I see some questions in the comments. Yeah, so there is another question from Eloise. So she's asking, you operate in different zones and you work in different countries. Why would one country be more suitable than another one? Why would you like one country more than another one? Is it more dangerous? Is it more competitive? What would be the choices, or how do you make those choices?
Well, yes, competition obviously is, you know, very important. If there's 100 other firms like us, not as, you know, appealing to go in compared to zero, which is why we started in South Sudan. We always ask ourselves, do we have the success that we have because we thought of it first, or because everyone thought of it and decided it was a terrible idea to work in these places? It's a good question. So I would say working one way or the other on a short-term basis depends on our capabilities as well. So that's why I said that North Africa is maybe not as appealing right now, because we do not have the Arabic staff that could write reports and conduct the research. So you may find that Algeria is perfect for research, and that's great to know, but we could not do it right now. Whereas we are building up our French-speaking staff, so French is of the utmost priority for our country. For our company, excuse me. So if we found a great opportunity that there were no if there were no companies in it and it required French speakers, that may be more appealing to us. So really depends on the local situation and the market for our research, as well as our capacity at the time.
Now, Benjamin, apparently the microphone didn't work, but he typed up his question. He says, so one more time, who are your main clients? You talked a lot about the government funds, but your clients are not governments. Who are your clients?
So first off, I would go to our website, and on our very first page, on the home page, there's a list of all of our biggest clients. So that's a start. But you know, we kind of separate our clients in terms of the different sectors that they work. So for donor governments, we work for USAID, DFID, the Department for International Development for the British. We work for the World Bank, JICA, the Japanese government. In terms of UN agencies, we work for UNICEF, ILO, the IOM, UNDP, UNESCO, UNIDO, UNHCR. In terms of development organizations, we work for Mercy Corps and Plan, FHI 360, the American Red Cross, BBC Media Action, Save the Children, those kind of organizations. And then, finally, something that we haven't mentioned much is the private sector. I don't mention as much because it's a very small part of our work. We do definitely do it, but things like Deloitte, the consulting firm, we work for MTN, the largest telecommunications provider in Africa, Nielsen, KPMG, TNS, so a lot of telecommunications, as well as Gallup. We've worked for the past for Pepsi, Jack Daniels, doing those kind of feasibility studies. Can my product go in here? So interesting, something that in a couple of years we'd probably explore more, but it's not the main source of our work. Is more development, humanitarian assistance, international development sector.
And a few questions that are kind of personal, and I wasn't sure if I would like to ask them, but just, I'll give you all of them and you decide which ones you would like to answer. So many people ask, one, you have a very cool job, you travel to interesting places, and you make a difference in the world. What steps one should take to have a career like yours? Questions whether or not you are married. If you are married, is it difficult to balance life and work? And other questions of that kind. And what kind of advice would you give to people who are just finishing the college and would like to have a successful career?
Absolutely. I am single, but I do have a girlfriend, so I am working within those confines as well. Confines is the wrong word. I'm working within a relationship back home, so it is possible to travel and do that kind of thing. I would say the majority of staff that work in our country offices, they are single. Mostly because contracts in our company, in our country offices, are 6 months to a year, usually 6 months. So, you're going to move to Kinshasa and DRC, and you're going to be there for a little while, so that can be difficult. Steps that I took to get to where I am, and what I can suggest is start from the bottom, no matter how low it is, do not be afraid to shovel the dirt, to get where you want to be. I started as an intern in our office in Cairo, and now I'm managing the office in America. So that's not as much a testament as it is to my skill as it is the opportunities that can be afforded at a small company and the trust that comes in when you take a chance and put yourself out there. So I moved to Cairo on a whim for a business development internship, and it turned into all these different things when I put my time in. So I would really say if you are interested in traveling and you're interested in working abroad and in this kind of sector, internships are great, so really take internships, work in the sector as much as you can with that kind of experience, and then really throw yourself out there in something that you would not normally do, take a risk, and see if it'll play out, because a lot of the times it will. So for me personally, it was a lot of different things that ended up for me at this point.
Yeah. This is such a job, such interesting issue. One last question that is not related to the challenge, but related to our future plans. As you know, the X-Culture Symposium will be held in November, and this time we have a very interesting location. We will leave from Florida on a cruise ship, go to one of the islands in the Caribbean region, and then come back. So there will be like a 5-day conference as we usually do, but instead of a convention center, it will be on a cruise ship. And at some point, you, Jan, mentioned a possibility that perhaps you and maybe even Natalie will be able to join us there. Is that still on plans? I mean, can we still talk about that? Would that be possible?
Absolutely. Both of us are planning on being there for sure.
Okay.
So we do have a back office that's located in Tampa. It's now going to be.
And we are leaving from Tampa, yeah.
So it's going to be our international headquarters. And for future reference as well, for those that are interested in working in the company for this kind of business development role, so dealing with grants and contracts and writing proposals, a lot of the information that we're gathering now on an actual managing the seeking out of opportunities, that is going to be based out of our Tampa office. So in the future, we'll have bid managers, people who are managing these grants and contracts from Tampa, and that's very soon, is in the next couple of months. So if you're interested in working with the company and you're not interested in living in Somalia, which is very fair, and you want to work with us still, there are a lot of opportunities in Tampa for different roles, which I would be happy to discuss. And you can think about as you're doing this project, if this is things that you like doing, business development, and this kind of information gathering and seeking of opportunities, there's a place in Tampa for it. So there's that shameless plug. And then also, yes, we would love to be there on the...
Yeah, I was actually talking with the organizer yesterday on the phone. And so we are looking very much into the possibility of not only you two being on board of the cruise ship as guests, but actually perhaps incorporating the Forcier events, I guess, or challenge somehow in the X-Culture Symposium program so that it's a prominent feature, permanent part of the symposium. So those of you who are working on this challenge, so we will be sending out the invitations probably starting in about a month or so, maybe 2 depending on how it goes. But the actual symposium will be taking place on November 10, 14. And so we will be leaving from Tampa and going to, I can't remember the name of the island, We will have 2 days on the cruise ship for the kind of business stuff, then 1 day off on the island, and then 2 days back. And so mark your calendars, and as long as you do well in X-Culture, you will receive an invitation. And so it's going to be a cool event. Lots of people from all around the world, not only the X-Culture students, obviously. In fact, it's an international conference, usually attracts best international business scholars from about 40 countries. So it's going to be a cool event, and hopefully Forcier will be part of the program.
Certainly.
Anyway, we are greatly over time. Sorry we took a little longer. Thank you so much, Ian. Thank you everyone else for joining us. There will be one more webinar next month. As you will start working on the project, you will probably have more specific questions, and that will be a good time to ask them. And again, if you have any other questions, just send them to admin@xculture.org. We will, if we don't have the question, we will forward it to Ian, and he will probably provide more information. And yeah, let's see how it goes. Thank you.
Vas, I also just wanted to add, if you wanted to send me that list of questions, again, I know I slacked on it last semester, but I'm happy to fill out all of the questions that you also put it up online.
Yeah, and there are a number of emails that I couldn't get to, just too many with the questions. So let me read them and see if there are any questions that we haven't answered, and maybe forward them to you as well, and then we'll update the frequently asked questions database that way.
Sure, sounds great.
Anyway, I'm going to stop the broadcast here.